Old man's neighbor blocked his driveway with cinder blocks, so he taught him a cruel lesson. The people who live near you can make living in your home wonderful, or it can make living there a nightmare. If you have great neighbors, you'll feel safe in your home. You might even have friends next door. If your neighbors are a nightmare, it can make you miserable. If they're bad enough, you might be tempted to move. When a man moved into a neighborhood in Osceola, Florida, nobody thought much about it at first. It wasn't long before the man's actions began to affect the people in the neighborhood, including an elderly man named Oliver Lynch. Oliver's a 79-year-old man who'd been living in the Florida neighborhood for over 25 years. He loved his home. He got along well with his neighbors. One thing that people in the community knew about Oliver was that even though he was elderly, you couldn't push him around. He may have been a quiet man, but if necessary, he'd stand up for himself. He always said that there was one thing that he hated, and it was being bullied. He says that he won't be the one to start problems with others, but he won't sit by and let people take advantage of him. At first, the new landowner seemed fine. When Oliver got home one day, he noticed that there was a long row of cinder blocks lined up in the middle of the driveway. Oliver was confused by this, so he went to talk to his neighbor. The neighbor claimed that Oliver's driveway was on his land. As far as Oliver was concerned, it was his driveway, and he was going to get it back. The next day, Oliver realized that things were worse than he even expected. His new neighbor had cemented the cinder blocks onto the driveway. Even if Oliver wanted to move them, he couldn't. If he tried to remove the cinder blocks, it would do severe damage to his driveway. Oliver knew that he couldn't take this lying down, and he had to take more drastic measures. Oliver felt an even amount of anger and disbelief. He couldn't believe that someone would go so far over a few yards of concrete. He thought that it was strange that something like this was happening in his neighborhood, since nobody on his block had had issues with one another till now. He didn't even know what his neighbor was planning to do with the extra few yards. Obviously, there was no way to reason with this crazy neighbor, so he decided to get some proof that it was his driveway and not his neighbor's. After going to the town and checking the survey's records, he discovered that he was entitled to two 12-foot driveways. Now, Oliver had the proof that he needed. After Oliver checked the surveyor's report, he started thinking about his new neighbor. The neighbor claimed to be a minister and a God-fearing man. Oliver didn't believe that what he was doing was very Christian-like. He said that a true man of God wouldn't do something so unreasonable to their neighbor. Oliver began to wonder who this man was. He was preaching "Love thy neighbor" to his congregation while trying to bully an elderly man when he got home. It didn't seem right, and Oliver called his neighbor a hypocrite. When Oliver realized that the town wasn't going to do anything about the situation, he went to the local media. They agreed to do a story, and Oliver explained on air everything that had happened. They tried to get the neighbor's side of the story, but they ignored the station's calls and messages. When the story aired, the support for Oliver was overwhelming. People all over town felt for Oliver and what he was going through. Unfortunately, the neighbor didn't budge and nothing changed. Oliver decided to call the media again. This time, Oliver made some progress. He finally talked to his neighbor and showed him the proof that the land was his. The neighbor apologized and said that it was just a big misunderstanding. When Oliver and his neighbor were finally able to settle their dispute, Oliver finally had hope for his future in the neighborhood. He wished that things didn't have to go as far as they did, but ultimately things were figured out. After speaking to his neighbor a few times, he realized that he really wasn't a bad guy.